Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. This week, as we begin a new year and a new season of Mountain Lake Journal, we are pleased to welcome the North Country's new Assemblyman, Michael Cashman, who will be heading to Albany this week to begin his first term representing the 115th District. It's good to see you. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
The New York State Legislature beginning the new session this week. We appreciate you taking time to sit down with us before you head down to Albany. What will be happening in the first few days of the session this week?
Yeah, so the first part of the session, like anything, if you think of local government, it's the organizational meeting. It's really kind of getting things organized in a short time. The governor will do her State of the State, but I've been really focused on making sure that the office is ready to meet stakeholders and constituents down in the Albany office.
And did you get on the assembly committees you were hoping to get on?
I did. So I've received the agriculture, tourism, and veterans, hoping that there may be one or two more committees in my portfolio, but really happy to have received the chairmanship for the New York Canadian Task Force.
And I was going to ask you about that. When you were running last fall, you said you had hoped that you would be able to take the reins from Assemblyman Billy Jones and chair that task force, looking to maintain the longstanding economic and cultural ties that the U.S. has with Canada, work with businesses and communities affected by the trade war, by the tariffs, escalating tensions between our two countries. What has that task force been able to do so far? And what are you hoping you'll be able to do as the new chair?
Yeah, so focusing on my work ahead, it's about continuing to have a strong bond and relationship. It's not just about the economics, it's about the social connective tissue as well. One of the largest trading partners for New York State is Canada. We have nearly 60,000 individuals that work for Canadian businesses in Canada, or for Canadian businesses, I should say. And the economic output for it is significant. So for the district specifically, we're a community that has many that border Canada. And from the tourism industry to the service industry to our manufacturing industries, we need to make sure that we have a good, strong relationship.
A lot of communities in the North Country feeling the impact of the tensions and the drop in tourism coming across the border.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to know that the state can't fix all the woes and impacts of the federal government, but what we can do is to make sure that our hand is always extended in friendship and that we're looking at things with clear-eyed to make sure that where there are opportunities that we can present a united front.
You've already drafted your first couple of bills.
Yeah.
You hope to introduce one that would place limits on how much the State and Public Utilities Commission would allow electric rates to increase every year in New York. Why have you decided to introduce this bill?
Yeah, so first and foremost, this bill does more than just limit the amount that they can raise. It's about transparency, it's about understanding what the fee structures are and the add-on fees in the bills. It's about the opportunity for auditing. And this actually goes back to my time when I was the Plattsburgh Town Supervisor. I was a municipal leader that heard from communities around the region as a member of the New York State Association of Towns and other areas. So it's not just here in Plattsburgh and here in the North Country, it's a statewide issue. And when I talked with constituents, they're really being hit hard at the kitchen table. Affordability has to be a top priority. And we all rely on electricity. And I knew that this was an opportunity to advance a bill on behalf of people here in the community.
What's been the response from party leaders and fellow assembly members to this?
I've already received my first co-sponsor, and you're talking about what does it look like over the next couple of days is having more conversations with my colleagues. I'm coming in midterm, making sure that I can have these conversations with colleagues and other sponsors in the Senate to try to advance this. Now, just because legislation is introduced doesn't mean that it's going to move forward right away. There's bureaucracy baked into everything. But what I am doing is taking the North Country voice and marrying it with larger New York concerns because one of my co-sponsors is outside of the area. So again, it's not just a North Country issue. We know that some of these utility companies are not doing best by their consumers.
And you'll have to get co-sponsors if you hope to get it out of committee and get it to the floor for a vote. Right. What's the second bill that you're looking to introduce this first session?
The other is a region equity bill, and boiling it down, take the electrification goals that New York State has. Now, I have not met a single individual that doesn't want clean water and clean air here in the North Country. But we also recognize that the electric goals for the North Country are unrealistic. And it's the electrification of our buses, it's the electrification of turning our homes and other businesses there. What this bill seeks to do is to have a 10-point plan or scope that reviews things before something can be placed into a region, with the expectation that it looks at, is the grid strong enough to actually move this forward? Are the utilities, are the infrastructure there to move forward? So think of it in a similar way. Just like we have a difference in the minimum wage, that regions need to have a regional approach to how we onboard bills and support things. So this will hopefully push back on some of the New York State goals, not saying that we don't want to be pro-environment, but what we're saying is that the goals and expectations are completely unrealistic.
And it looks as if the governor and Democratic leadership may be ready to put the brakes on some of those mandates when it comes to electrification.
That's true, and that's why, putting forward a bill that says the North Country has North Country problems and we need North Country solutions. We don't need Albany solutions to North Country problems, which often there is a huge disconnect by.
Governor Hochul will be delivering her State of the State address this coming week, next Tuesday. What are you expecting to hear from her?
Well, I've told people that I have a long time ago given up on trying to forecast what other people try to put out in the world. I'll be listening intently, hoping that the North Country is identified as an opportunity for investment and resources. Going to continue to try to punch above our weight to bring those resources back home, but affordability has to be on everyone's kitchen table. Affordability
was the key word and focus of her State of the State a year ago. Do you think that she and the Democratic leaders in both the Assembly and Senate delivered on her promise to address higher costs of living in New York, making it more affordable? Yes, there was the $400 refund that came to 8 million New York families this past fall. There's free school lunch and breakfast in public schools. But do you think the governor and the Democratic leadership in both the Assembly and the Senate have gone far enough to address the rising cost of living for most families?
We need to have ongoing progress. We often take too much time looking backward at things rather than looking forward to things. Affordability is still on the table. It's something that I ran on. It's something that I'm intimately familiar with, and having conversations with hundreds of people throughout the 115th. And people often ask, what are your top priorities? Priorities are things like housing and infrastructure and making sure seniors can age in place in their homes. It's making sure that we have safe communities, making sure that we're protecting our CEOs and our first responders. It's about making sure that we have broadband for all of our communities. We cannot look at things in a singular way anymore. We have to find ways that things become cross-pollinated and that we plant the seeds, tend to them, and make sure that we can bear fruit later on.
Back to Governor Hochul. If you had a chance to talk with Speaker Hasty about her decision just before Thanksgiving, she and the Department of Corrections closing down Bear Hill Correctional in Malone, 300 jobs being lost. That came just days after you were sworn in. Have you had a chance to talk with the party leadership about that?
Yeah, I did have an opportunity to speak with the Speaker following the governor's bad decision, and expressed my disappointment and my frustration, and how the North Country it was being unserved by this decision again, and that people felt as though it was even vindictive.
All the corrections officers and staff have been told they will be offered jobs at other state correctional facilities in the Tri-County region within Franklin, Clinton, and Essex counties. Does that help soften the impact, the loss of those 300?
It doesn't, because it's much more complex than this. Let me strip this apart in a couple different ways. First and foremost, our correctional officers are not being treated with safety in mind. We know that there's a safety issue that's going on, and that's something that I brought to the attention of leadership. In addition to that, we have communities that rely on that workforce within those communities to support small businesses and municipal services. So again, it's about the dignity of the employees, it's about the safety of employees, it's about the economic impact of things. Overall, it was a bad decision.
The governor just recently has signed a prison reform bill into law that mandates body cameras and other new oversights within state correctional facilities after the deaths of 2 inmates last year. Do you support that bill?
Well, this is what I'll tell you, Tom. is the reforms that we need to start with the safety of the officers as well. We're not doing the mail checks to make sure that the substances are not getting into the facilities. We also have EMS services that are stacking up outside of our facilities when there is a chemical released from time to time, which then impacts our small communities that are reliant on the EMS services.
Staffing issues are big for corrections officers, working conditions. Also the HALT Act. Will you follow in Billy Jones' footsteps calling for the repeal of the HALT Act?
I have long been on the record for saying that I support the same position as Billy. We should be, reforming the bad decisions of that.
And are you worried about more prisons being targeted for closure in the budget year ahead?
I think one always has to be concerned, but again, I am not a shy person. I will make sure that my voice is heard by the speaker and others. But again, as we stand here today, several bad decisions have been made by the governor in this particular area.
Last fall during the special election, there were lots of concerns about federal budget cuts. Should the state step in and help cover those costs? Costs for Medicare, costs for SNAP, costs for healthcare subsidies.
Yeah, I think it's really important not to put the cart before the horse. We have to see, how the federal government responds to it. But I will say that my internal value is we shouldn't have people going hungry in our country. We shouldn't have veterans that are, losing their services. I've long called for Congress to codify certain programs that protect the human element that connects us all: food, housing, so on and so forth.
You're planning to hold town hall meetings around the district in the coming weeks. You held your first this week in the town of Jay in Essex County. What did you hear from those who attended?
Affordability, safety, talking about broadband infrastructure, but we also talked about school districts. We talked about roads and bridges. We also talked about the unrealistic goals of electrification.
And when and where are your next couple of town hall meetings? How many are you planning to hold?
We're doing about 5 over the course of the next several weeks. The next one is going to be in Chateaugay, and then Champlain, still putting some more details on the other ones in the coming weeks.
Michael Cashman, thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with us. We appreciate it.